Hello and welcome to another Gaming Stooges Talks video.
Oh.
It's Gaming Stooges Talks Top 10.
Top 10. We did something a little special this time, so we're going to talk about our top 10 video game systems of all time. But we're doing it a little different. Typically, we'd have all four of us have our own specific list, and then we just talk about them and go around in a circle. In order to save some time and do something a little bit different, we have I took everybody's list together and we assigned points based on how high they were on each person's list, and whichever systems had the most points ended up higher on the list, and obviously those that didn't have enough points to make the list are not on this. There's a couple here that are tied. In the case of a tie, the one that ended up getting a higher rank on someone else's list gets the higher spot. Thankfully, there was no other discrepancies, so I didn't have to figure out anything else special. But anyway, so we got 10 video game systems we're going to talk about. We counted the Game Boy and Game Boy Color as one system. They did not make the list anyway, so it doesn't matter. And we did not count PC, obviously. Without further ado, we're going to start with number 10. I'm going to say how many points they got. Number 10 was the Sega Genesis with 15 points. It ties with another system, but it got the lower of the highest ranks, so it is here at number 10. It was number 4 on Justin's list. It was number 5th on my list. So those are the only two people where it was on the list. So,
okay, are you going to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. Justin, what did you want to say about it? Because I believe you were the one that put it higher.
Well, I mean, a lot of the highest consoles you'll see on this list that actually make it anyway are mostly childhood consoles that I played growing up, so I have a lot of memories when I was young. Sonic 1 was actually the very first game I've ever played, and of course, that was on the Genesis, so the Genesis was first system I ever used. And then I know I'm just super biased for Sega, and I always have been. I never had a Super NES. I think I've said this before, but the most I got from Nintendo was the NES. That was it. And then that broke, and then we never got a Super NES. My dad bought us a Genesis, and that's how I pretty much became the Sega fanboy that I am, because I didn't actually really get that involved with Nintendo until I got the Game Boy, really. So it was all Genesis for me. And, obviously all the Sonic games, I loved them to death. And then, there was still some games that were not owned by Sega. I have a fond experience with something called, was it Air Raider, I think it was? I can't remember the exact title, but there's a few odd Genesis games that I'm sure a lot of people would kind of pass on. But, when you're a kid, they kind of become your childhood games, and you have fond memories of them. A lot of Genesis is just nostalgia for me, but I still think ahead.
So for me personally, the reason why I put the Genesis as high up on my list as I did was basically what you said, just childhood nostalgia. I think I've said this before in other videos. I ended up with the Super Nintendo growing up, and my sister was the one that ended up getting the Genesis. So I did play the Genesis a lot, and I grew up with a lot of really good Genesis games. I mean, there was the Sonic games, there was Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, there was Vector Man. I would end up playing Ristar later on. Mortal Kombat on the Genesis was good. The Lion King game, the Toy Story game. When I was under foster care at one point, and I ended up having a Genesis at the time, and that was my big system to kind of escape. And there was so many good games that I played on that too. So this Genesis just has a really good library. It's no surprise that the Super Nintendo and the Genesis ended up in such a strong feud with each other, because both of them just have really good libraries. I think the only thing that really stopped me from the Genesis as much is just the fact that there's just more that I like on other systems, but there's just so many good things on the Genesis, and the controller's really comfy for a system from the 90s. Actually, it came out in 89 technically. A system with that nice of a D-pad and just that nice of a curvature, they really paved the way for some more comfortable video game controllers. And I think that's an important thing, because where we're talking about the video game systems as a whole, I looked at more than just the libraries, and the Genesis did quite a lot of things right. But that's pretty much anything. Did either of you want to add in on the Genesis, Jack or Landon, or were you good?
I enjoy the Genesis. I didn't own one myself growing up, so it's not like a nostalgia type deal. I mean, I do have like some childhood memories of playing other people's Genesis systems, but you know, going back and like collecting, I picked one up for pretty cheap, and it like was on my like list of stuff to like think about putting on my list. Didn't quite make it. But I do love the library. It has a lot of good stuff. And then it's like my go-to like controller is it's a third-party one, but it's a Sega Genesis controller whenever I'm playing like on my Retron 5, just because it is like it's an easy controller to use. The 6-button Genesis controller is just a nice controller. So yeah.
And what about you, Jack? Anything to add?
My deal with the Genesis is that I didn't, like, I owned one very briefly when I was a child, but, like, I only, like, played Sonic games on it, and pretty much nothing else. So I, like, A, don't have a ton of experience with Genesis games, and B, like, in terms of the library, I don't know. I mean, in my opinion, a lot of the multi-platforms that existed on both the Genesis and the Super Nintendo were just kind of better on the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. Aside from that, though, like, there are some good games on it, of course, but, like, just not a ton that I've personally experienced, so that's pretty much it.
All right, we're going to move on to number 9, also with 15 points, but its highest rank was 3rd. Same two people, Justin and myself, were the ones that ended up putting this system on our list. The Sony PlayStation 1 ended up with 15 points. It was 3rd on Justin's, 6th on mine. So, yeah, Justin, did you want to go ahead and talk about your feelings about the PS1?
Oh, I could fap to this system all day.
Try to keep it brief.
Well, let's just say a lot of the, what Sony, or I can't even talk now. A lot of the games that I played were pretty much what put Sony on the map. And so a lot of them should be obvious, like, we got fucking Crash, got Spyro. I mean, I know, like, I think, Cloud, you said you didn't play one of those? You said you didn't play a lot of Crash?
No, I played a decent amount of Crash. It's just when people, like, talk about Crash and Spyro's just the one I played more of. But, like, I played all 4 of the main, I've played all 5 of the Crash games that were on the PS1. I didn't play a whole lot of Bash or Racing, but I did play the main trilogy a decent amount.
But yeah, I mean, I was kind of a fanboy of both. Like, I have a huge collection of Spyro and Crash games, good and bad. And, I also played other things that maybe only a few people have actually played, like Medieval and stuff, or, I also played one of the Oddworld games on PS1, which is a big favorite of mine. I love that franchise. So yeah, there was a whole lot of PS1 goodness to go around. Oh, and of course, Resident Evil. How could I forget that? So, like, long story short, PlayStation 1 had an amazing library, like none other, in my opinion. And I honestly think it deserves all the fame it's gotten over the years, because it is a really good system. There are really good games for it. And the PS1 opening is legendary. I will never find another console that has a more legendary opening than when the PS1 turned on. Well, it's like a double whammy.
When you don't know if it, the anxiety when you don't know if it's actually going to play the actual PlayStation logo next.
Oh yeah, but
you're just like, please let my disc still work.
That literally was, if the dream was real, because sometimes the disc is scratched and the PlayStation logo doesn't show up. But no, like I said, that opening is legendary. Even the PS2 is not as good as that one.
The reason I put the PlayStation on my list was because it was probably, although it wasn't my first system, not even the one I owned, nor the first one I played, it's probably the home console that really solidified my desire to play home console games. My family ended up owning one. We put it in the living room. I played tons of Spyro, Crash. Later on, I would end up getting into the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy titles. Ape Escape was a really big favorite of mine that I really feel like needs a ton more exposure than it does. It's just, the PlayStation library is vast. There's a lot of smaller games that I like. There's a lot of bigger games that I like. I could go on for hours talking about different games that I played for it, but I won't, because that's just
That's literally your entire childhood.
Yeah, but it's the home console that really got me into home console gaming and actually kept me there. Just the fact that they were on CDs was very different, because obviously pretty much everything before that
was cards.
Was cartridges in some form or another. They might have been funky looking in one way, but like they started the whole disc thing, and they managed to start the standard of bigger games with higher production values on these like massive file sizes. And I think while like there's something that needs to be said about like maybe games get a little too big sometimes nowadays, the fact that the PlayStation helped really like transform games into what they kind of helped start this debate that are games art. Because before like the mid to late 90s, you didn't really have that conversation, but like the PlayStation really had such a massive library where it's like, you know, maybe games do deserve a lot more respect than the rest of society was giving it at the time. But that's basically why it's a childhood thing. There's a lot of great games on it. The controller is so fucking comfortable. There's a reason that they kept it around for so long. It had CD compatibility, so that was cool. You know, just a lot of good things about the PlayStation. Basically added up to just a really good experience overall. Landon and Jack, did you want to weigh in on the PlayStation?
You can go first, Landon.
Sure. I mean, it has a good library. I don't care for the system. It looks boring. There's that. And it's kind of whatever. I don't have any feelings towards the PlayStation. I will recognize that it has a good, strong game library, though. So there's that.
It's kind of the same for me. By the time the PS1 came out, it was already kind of like... I mean, like, I was born the same year that the PS1 came out, so it's like, by the time I got into video games at all, the PS2 was already out, so it was like...
A little too late for you.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a good like handful of games that I've played either through ports or remakes that were on the PS1 that I do really like, but like for the most part, it's just not a console that I've had a lot of first-hand experience with. So
Jack, stop making me feel old.
You are 2 years older than me. I'm not that much younger. I'm not that much younger than you.
Yeah, not anymore anyway. Jack used to be like a considerable amount younger, but now that we're all kind of old, like now the distance in age really isn't all that much. So if you guys had basically said everything, we can move on to our number 8.
Yep.
Our number 8 being carried basically by one of the two people who had it on their list having it in first place. We have, with 16 points, the Sega Dreamcast, which was first on Justin's list, and 8th on Jack's. Before I let them talk about it, I did want to mention, I did not actually mention this, the point totals was basically first place got 12, and then it jumped down to second place got 10, and then it was 1 point down, all the way until 9th got 2 points, and 10th place got 1 point. So, yeah, that's how the points ended up. So, Justin and Jack, you guys can talk about the Dreamcast, whichever one of you wants to start. And
you can go first, Justin.
Well, I might as well, because I basically carried the Dreamcast on my back.
Oh, that's okay. The next system, the same thing happens, but with someone else.
So Dreamcast, I have a lot of fond memories of, because, again, it's a childhood console. Not as young as Genesis, obviously, but, still there. Dreamcast didn't live that long, but goddamn, I loved almost everything I played on that fucking thing. Like, some of my all-time favorite games are on the Dreamcast, like, obviously, the 2 Sonic Adventure games, Skies of Arcadia I love to death. That's the whole reason I actually like Valkyria Chronicles, is because it's made by the same team that made Skies of Arcadia. So, there's a lot of, like, personal, I don't know if you really call it preference, but you know what I mean, for the Dreamcast when it comes to me. I have a lot of good memories with it. A lot of it's Skies of Arcadia or Sonic related, admittedly. And it also had Jet Set Radio, which, at the time, I actually didn't appreciate that much when I was a kid. Now that I've gotten older, I actually do like Jet Set Radio a whole lot. And it was also the game that I played Dino Crisis on, which is how I got introduced to a series that basically, died when Capcom kind of ruined it. But yeah, the Dreamcast had obviously much better graphics than the PS1, which is kind of one of the reasons why I liked it so much. But it was also mostly just the game library being absolutely excellent, in my opinion. Like, maybe it's just because I didn't play, like, the entire library, but I can say with confidence I have not played a bad game on the Dreamcast. So, there's that.
I didn't grow up with a Dreamcast. Like, I didn't actually, like... I mean, I had a friend that had a Dreamcast when I was really young, but I didn't play a ton on it. But I was just, like... It was just a game... It was a console that, like, had a lot of games on it that I was, like... That I played, like the PS1, either through ports on other systems or, just, remakes, on other systems. But, like, I did buy a Dreamcast, like, 7-8 years ago. Secondhand, and you know, I admire the Dreamcast, like, despite its incredibly short lifespan for how strong the game library is, and again, in the very short span of time that it lived. I love Jet Set Radio and the Sonic Adventures and Crazy Taxi and Space Channel 5. Even games like Sega Bass Fishing are really good. It has the first two Tony Hawk games. Hydro Thunder. It has a really, really good library, despite, again, being alive for about a year and a half before dying, putting Sega out of the console business, unfortunately. That's pretty much it, though.
Landon, did you want to say anything about the Dreamcast?
Yeah, I own one.
Actually,
it is a fun
this is
system.
probably the first system on the list where, like, we all really had some sort of experience with it, because I do also own one.
Yeah, it's fun. I think the biggest thing for me not including it on my list was just how short the lifespan of it was. But it definitely has like a pretty solid library. I mean, yeah, no, it has a solid library. I like the controller and the VMU setup. So those are things to take into consideration. I think the only thing I don't like about the controller is the board.
The fact that
placement,
it starts from the bottom.
is on the
That's one
bottom.
thing I have about
That's
it.
weird.
Yeah. So there's that. And if that is the entire reason why it never made my list, then so
the
be
main
it.
reason it wasn't on my list was just the fact that I didn't have enough time to actually really experience it, and by the time I did get around to it, there's just so many other things that I've been playing. What's up?
No, I was just say, in terms of controller design, you're welcome, Xbox.
Anyway, with the Dreamcast, I think that they had a really cool idea. They had some ideas with the Dreamcast that were a little ahead of their time, but then they also had a few ideas that were a little too late to the party. Because, like, with the VMU setup, that's kind of like it feel like, I don't know how expensive those were, but I feel like that was kind of like already done with like the expansion packs with the N64, and by then the N64 was already out for, like, I mean, the VMUs were a cute idea because it had like an LCD, just like a little display.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like a memory that was inserted into the controller for memory reading, save data and stuff like that. That was something that was already done in a way with the N64, so it was kind of an idea that was already explored. But at the same time, the Dreamcast also was like the first real major system to kind of have any sort of online functionality that was actually useful, that was actually used by people. And they also like had a decent game catalog that had very good graphics for its time. Like, the Dreamcast was the first out of the gate for that generation, so you got to see games like Sonic Adventure for its time had some incredible graphics. Like, I mean, nowadays it's, but whatever.
Dated.
Like, yeah, but at the time the Dreamcast was ahead of its time in some respects. But like I said, it's a shame. The system kind of only lived technically like a year and a half out here. It was dead, killed off basically because of the competition in Sega's previous, and it's a shame. Like, the Dreamcast had a lot of potential, and it definitely tried its best. So I think it deserves a spot here.
I mean, at the end of the Dreamcast, I guess you could say the thing with Sega is that a lot of their consoles had a lot of innovation, but Sega was very short-sighted and didn't know how to handle all of it.
All right, so moving on to our next one, we have, with 18 points in 7th place, is the Nintendo Wii, which Jack put first and Landon put 6th on their lists. So, Jack, you should start this one off since you're the one carrying the Wii onto this list. Tell me about it. Tell us how you feel.
Yeah, sure. The Wii is my favorite system. There's a ton of great games on it.
Jack, wait. Can you just tell us that the Wii won and we need to get over it?
Oh yeah, the Wii won. Get over it. What the fuck, guys? But no, yeah, the Wii. It's just like I just thought about it, and I was like, when it comes down to it, I don't give a shit about like hardware as long as the games are good. Unless it's like, you know, I guess like in terms of multi-platform games that look significantly shittier than they do on other systems, but the Wii didn't have like a ton of multi-platform games that weren't like sports games, which were, you know, fine on the Wii. But like, I don't know, in terms of library, it just has like a lot of really good ones. 3 of my 5 favorite games of all time are Wii games. Galaxy 2, and Xenoblade. Not now, Momo. I'm talking about the Wii. This is important. Yeah, I don't know. It has the best version of Resident Evil. It has two great Kirby games and a Kirby collection. It has fun, like, it really just, like, in terms of, like, first-party support, it's, like, probably, in my opinion, Nintendo's best. And on top of that, it also has like, a really underrated third-party library. Games like No More Heroes and Excitebots Trick Racing, fucking Little King Story, Klonoa, A Boy and His Blob, the Bit Trip series. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like, motion controls I don't give a shit about. Like, generally, they're implemented in, like, they're kind of, like, shoehorned into games. But for the most part, like, they're either not very intrusive, or there's usually an option to, like, use a different controller method with a GameCube controller or a classic controller, or it just doesn't use motion controls, which is also acceptable. But yeah, no, for the most part, A+ library, in my opinion. Not the strongest console, but, like, I don't really care. The games are fun. And yeah, that's about it.
Oh.
Landon.
What?
You okay? Did you fall asleep?
No. Only a lot.
Oh, wow.
Rude. The Nintendo. It was mostly when you started talking about the Dreamcast. The Nintendo Wii is a video game system. The end.
That's it? I mean, you did put it on your list, so, like, I'm sure you have more to say about it.
I enjoy the Wii. It was definitely during the height of the Wii's, like, time frame, the system I played the most for 2 reasons. 1, GameCube backwards compatibility, and then 2, because the other 2 systems are, like, far more expensive. And while I had access to them, like, my brother had a PS3, I don't know. The games, I like more so, like Jack said, the first party and the major third party games always, like, grabbed my attention. And then there was also the Virtual Console, which I really liked because that gave me access to older systems and be able to play those. So definitely the Virtual Console, while you can no longer access it if you buy a Wii, is part of the reason why I really enjoyed it. That, and I like the controller, the Wiimote. It fits in your hand nice. You have access to all the buttons that you need, depending on how you like actually hold it. And especially if you use one of the comfort grips, it's fine. And then when games use motion control well, it's nice. There's a reason why the Wii Sports is still super popular, even if, like, the motion control itself is not like super accurate. It's still, like, fun for people. So there's that.
I did not. I was close to putting the Wii on my list. I do enjoy the Wii. I think it has a pretty good catalog of games. It can be hit or miss at times. There's some really good ones, and then there's a ton of shovelware. My main issue with the Wii that kind of held me back from actually putting on the list is I did really think hard about hardware, as well as just the interface of the system as a whole. Like, what did it do in terms of helping evolve video game systems, and the Wii kind of had some like hit or miss functions in that regard. Like, it had some really cool ideas. Like, I liked the different like channels like that you could use on the Wii. Like, that was kind of fun, but at the same time, like I was not a big fan of the controllers. And like, even having like the classic controller, the fact that you have to plug that into another controller is still kind of eh. But like, the game library is really good. It's not the most powerful system in the world. It's not supposed to be the most powerful system in the world. I do really wish that a lot more of the Wii's games would end up getting brought to other systems, because I really feel like some of those games, specifically third-party ones, they didn't end up getting a whole lot of love because the Wii sales like drowned in first-party titles. So there was like good titles that did decently well, but I feel like if they re-release them, they could have another shot at doing even better. Like, I really wish that Sonic Colors would get a re-release. Sega, you definitely could just do that, please. But yeah, like the Wii was decent. I liked it. It was overall a pretty good system. I didn't actually put any of the systems for the home consoles from this generation on my list, so I mean, the Wii was the closest to being on it, to be fair. Justin, would you like to talk about the Wii at all?
I mean, I didn't play it that much, but that doesn't mean I'm like completely ignorant of it either. I actually, this is kind of sound kind of sad, but most of my use for the Wii was either some of the enhanced versions of like maybe some like GameCube games, like Pikmin, or it was my GameCube machine when my GameCube kind of like decided it wasn't going to work anymore for some reason. I don't actually remember what happened with it, but yeah, trying to think. I did play some Star Wars game that was on the Wii, because I don't remember if it was exclusive to it or it was the only version we could get. But Sonic and the Secret Rings is probably the game I actually played most on the Wii, because obviously, you know, of course I'm gonna get a fucking Sonic game. And I'm probably the only one that actually likes that game, at least a little bit. Like, that was probably my entry into like how the motion controls work, because when I got Smash Brothers for it, I kind of didn't really use the Wiimote. I used the Wiimote nunchuck thing, but I was mostly the GameCube controller. So Sonic and the Secret Rings is like the only real time I actually used the motion controls that much. And they were actually pretty responsive. I didn't ever have the Wii Motion Plus, because I think at that point it was kind of pointless. But I thought it was responsive enough to the point that, the game was still playable. It's not like it was broken. It was competently made. It's just a lot of the motion controls just depended on whether or not the developer is a competent developer. So what I played on the Wii, it wasn't a whole lot, but I still had my enjoyment with it.
All right. We're going to move on to number 6, which is actually one of only 2 systems that all 4 of us had on our list at some point. We have the Nintendo Game Boy Advance, which had 19 points, just edging out the Wii. It was 4th on Landon's, 5th on Justin's, and it was 9th on both mine and Jack's list. So it was on everyone's list. Landon, since it was highest on yours, I'm going to let you go first on the Game Boy Advance, and then we'll move on to Justin, and then me and Jack.
Gross. So F the original Game Boy Advance. I never owned one.
This entry is technically for Landon, the Game Boy Advance SP TM.
Correct. Yeah, the Game Boy Advance SP is the correct one. Why? Rechargeable battery, backlight screen, and it doesn't look like something I picked out while I was walking on the ground in a forest, because it looks like a weird pebble rock thing. I don't know. Oh, and it can flip and close. I spent a lot of time playing Game Boy Advance SP. 1, backwards compatible. Then 2, literally everything I mentioned about it. It has a backlit screen and a rechargeable battery. So, it was perfect for me to use whenever I wanted. I didn't have to go through all 10 billion batteries that I'd have to use for Game Boy and Game Boy Colors. Also has a really good library that I mostly played Pokemon on it, because anything that was before the DS was a Pokemon machine. Known fact, about all I got.
Alright, Justin, Game Boy Advance, go.
Alright, so I'm just gonna say I played the Advance, I've also played on the SP, and I've even played on the fucking DS, so I have a lot of experience with this fucking
I
thing.
played a Game Boy Micro for about one afternoon of my life.
Oh god.
I'm sorry.
So, the Game Boy Advance is probably the single most played handheld I've ever gotten. Like, even me playing Fire Emblem to death does not even come close to how many hours I put on the Advance. Because it was also what I used to play my Game Boy games on, because of the fact, well, it was just like the new thing. I wanted to see the Game Boy feature. And it's also the most supported system in terms of like attachments that I've gotten, because I also have the tradie thing, and as well as the Game Boy player. So yeah, that means I've also played on the GameCube. I have like a good selection of both third-party and first-party Game Boy Advance games. Some of them are kind of weird. Like, I remember I have a Tomb Raider game that I never actually beat on that thing. Some of my favorite games are obviously like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. I love that game. And then I played the entirety of the Sonic Advance series on the Game Boy Advance.
Yes.
Yeah, I played Advance 1 through 3. I even played Sonic Battle on it, and despite the fact that some people don't like Sonic Battle, I actually enjoyed it. Like, it's kind of difficult, but I don't know. I guess I just was naturally good at it. I have no idea. That one was actually like a friend's, so I didn't play like. Well, actually, I did beat the game, but I never actually got to keep it myself. But yeah. So what a surprise! My fucking game consoles or handle is dominated by Sonic. Yeah, from what I played of it, it was a really good handheld. Obviously better than the Game Boy, but I'm not saying the Game Boy is bad. It's just the graphical appeal is fun too. Thank God for the SP, because that thing is dark as shit and you can't see nothing. Game Boy Advance, you know, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. Jack, did you want me to chime in first and then you would go last?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so my experience with the Game Boy Advance, I probably could have put the Game Boy Advance a little higher. I'll get on why it ended up only 9th on mine in a second. But the Game Boy Advance, great system, strong library of games. There was a lot of good ports and remakes of older games. You had the older Final Fantasy redos. There was, oh my god, they went through 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. All on that one system. Pokemon games are always obviously great. Pretty much all of them, yeah. Even some of the side Pokemon games. We got Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team, as well as the DS one Blue Rescue Team. But like, this is like just saying we had some good side series that started here. Sonic Advance series was really, really good. I really enjoyed them. We had the remakes / ports for Super Mario All-Stars version of Super Mario 2 and Super Mario 3, and as well as Super Mario World. So those were pretty good, as well as Yoshi's Island. So, you know, having those on there. Minish Cap, I did play quite a bit of. That was really fun. I think the main reason why I didn't put the Game Boy Advance higher was just two things. One, just like Landon said, I do incorporate hardware and other things into my analysis, and it was a little later in the system's lifespan where we actually got the really good version of the Game Boy Advance with the SP. The Game Boy Advance itself it's comfortable, but at the same time, the fact that it had no backlight and no rechargeable battery at its time, I feel like that was a little dated, and I think that was kind of behind the times. Like, it came out in late 2001, and it didn't have any of those things yet, so we have to wait a few years for us to get those things. But once it did, like, it was good. And my other reason I didn't put it higher was, yes, the Game Boy Advance has a really strong library, but at the same time, I don't feel like there's any particular couple of games that, like, you would put from the Game Boy Advance as, like, greatest games of all time. Like, there's a lot of really good games on here. But at the same time, I feel like when we talk about greatest games of all time, typically the Game Boy Advance, you don't get many titles, if any, that are actually way up there on that list. It's pretty much other systems that are all taking those slots. So the Game Boy Advance had...
I'm sorry, but are you dissing Mario Kart Super Circuit?
Yes, I am, actually.
Okay, thank God.
But yeah, that's my main reason why I didn't put it higher. Is just it's a solid, but not S-tier game library, and it was a lot of fun. So that's how I feel about the Game Boy Advance overall. It was, fun fact, before I let Jack take over, the first system I had that I got when it came out at least near its launch date, because everything else I had to wait at least a year or more. I got the Game Boy Advance like the holiday season, just about that the system had come out, so that was cool. Good, Jack, go ahead.
Hey, the Game Boy Advance. This is the first console I ever owned.
Oh.
Yeah, I got this for Christmas in
Aw.
2001. I mean, I had played video games before this, but like, you know, at friends' or cousins' houses or whatever. Yeah, the Game Boy Advance, you know, good system. In terms of hardware, yeah, the first model is a piece of shit. There's no backlight. I spent many an afternoon sitting in the den upstairs because, like, that's where, like, the brightest lamp in the house was, and I would just sit under that lamp and play Pokemon. Yeah, I don't know. The SP is the correct version, but at the same time, its fatal flaw is a lack of headphone jack, which most people don't think about. But otherwise, yeah, good but not great library.
Nintendo took away the headphone jack first before Apple thought of it. Apple can't even think of taking out features first.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's good. Like, yeah, good but not great library. It does have my favorite Pokemon games and all those other fucking games that they mentioned. Good Metroids, fucking Zelda. Yeah, I don't know. That's about it. I don't have much else to say. I did spend a long time. I did spend like a lot of hours on it as a kid, but like, you know, it's not the best. Good though.
All right. So that was our 10 through 6. So we will be right back with numbers 5 through 1. Thank you for joining us so far. Let us know your 6 through 10 down below, obviously, and we will catch you with our 5 to 1.